Today, let's continue in our series of devotions in the book of Jonah. This devotional is entitled, "The Lord Sent the Storm." Let's now read from Jonah chapter 1, verse 4. Then the Lord sent a great wind on the sea, and such a violent storm arose that the ship threatened to break up. In summary, running away from God always leads us into a storm. Let me say that again. In summary, running away from God always leads us into a storm. Last week, as we began our series in Jonah, we saw how he ran away from the Lord's command to go to Nineveh and preach there. He didn't want to go there because of fear, pride. He thought he knew better, hated the people of Nineveh. We don't completely know. All we do know is that he ran away, got on board a ship and went in the opposite direction. He ran away from the Lord. And today we see, and through this week we will see, that the Lord sent a storm in order to bring Jonah to his senses. The storms of life come in three main ways. Firstly, storms or circumstances that test us and develop us can be directly sent by God according to his good will and purpose. And that's what we're seeing here in the book of Jonah. God sent this storm to wake him up from his backsliding. The second way that storms come to us is that they are allowed. They are a part of God, what we call God's permissive will. He allows it to happen, allows challenging circumstances to happen. These again are permitted for our good, to change us, to make us more like Christ, to develop his purposes. Finally, storms, and this is the most often is the case, is that storms are directly the result of our own unwise and sinful behaviour. Many of our problems are of our own bad investment. What we're doing, what we're not doing, unwise living. So, for example, if we fail to invest in our health, we will have poor health. If we don't listen to God's wisdom regarding marriage, if we don't love our wives or love our spouse, we will have a bad marriage. If we don't love and discipline our children, we'll have a bad family. These are the storms that come as a result of our laziness or just disobedience, thinking we know better. So these storms come, but they are always, for the Christian, sent by a loving Father to discipline us, to grow and develop us, although they can be very painful. Tim Keller wrote in The Prodigal Prophet, his book on Jonah, "The dismaying news is that every act of disobedience to God has a storm attached to it. The Bible does not say that every difficulty is the result of sin, but it does teach that every sin will bring you into difficulty. We cannot treat our bodies indifferently and still expect to have good health. We cannot treat people indifferently and expect to maintain their friendship. We cannot all put our own selfish interests ahead of the common good and still have a functioning society. If we violate the design and purpose of things, if we sin against our bodies, our relationships, or society, they will strike back. There are consequences if we violate the laws of God. We are violating our own design, since God built us to know, serve, and love Him. In God's love and sovereignty, He sends or allows us to experience trials of many kinds in order to grow us, develop us in Christ's likeness. Jonah had gone the opposite direction from God. He had run away from God. God sends this storm in order to adjust Jonah's attitude, his hatred, his pride, his rebellion is being transformed by this storm. The Bible calls it God's discipline. God disciplines those He loves. We read in Hebrews chapter 12. If we are to grow in Christ's likeness, we will go through storms. Paul wrote about his own hardships and how they taught him. We read in 2 Corinthians 1:8-10. We do not want you to be uninformed, brothers and sisters, about the troubles we experienced in the province of Asia. We were under great pressure, far beyond our ability to endure, so that we despaired of life itself. Indeed, we felt we had received the sentence of death. But this happened that we might not rely on ourselves, but on God, who raises the dead. He has delivered us from such a deadly peril, and He will deliver us again. On Him we have set our hope that He will continue to deliver us. Do you see in this text that in these circumstances that have been allowed by God, these deep trials, we despaired even of life beyond our ability to endure? These are serious troubles, aren't they? In this, He sees the purpose. This has happened that we might not rely on ourselves. This has happened that our faith in God will grow so that we will have greater confidence that He will continue to deliver us. You see, there's a humility that's being built here. There is faith that's being built here. Later in 2 Corinthians, we see a similar idea. After listing a load of very severe trials he was facing, including an unanswered prayer that God would take away a thorn in the flesh, Paul explains that through these experiences, he learned to rely on God's power. We read in 2 Corinthians 12:9, but he said to me, God said to him, my grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness. Therefore I will boast all the more gladly about my weaknesses, so that the power of Christ may rest on me. You see, through these trials, even praying that God would take away some of them, this thorn in the flesh, God said to him, my grace is sufficient for you. I want to teach you my grace. I want to teach you my power. I want to teach you your weakness and your need for me. God has deep lessons He teaches us through suffering. We may not like this, but this is true. So in response, as Christians, we need to know that there is always a good purpose for us in any storm that we are permitted to experience. Our Father has a good purpose to transform us and to further His purposes. We are to face severe trials with two simultaneous attitudes. Firstly, in trials, we are to trust God that He is in this working for our good. But the second attitude is to pray that God would remove the trial, would bring it to an end, would sustain us in it. So those two things, trust and prayer, as we go through any trial that God permits in our lives. God bless you.